What is up, coders? Welcome to another Warframe video. I am bringing you an extra special video on the Nintendo Switch. This is a follow-up to my last video that I did on Nintendo Switch specifically for this game, and that was a graphics setting and overall just settings video. The reason I want to make an update is because a lot has changed in the game since that. First of all, you're looking at a lovely update here. The Fortuna update is actually here, so Orb Vallis is in the game, which comes with its own performance challenges, resolution, degradation, stuff like that I wanted to talk about and just show you exactly what I do specifically to get around some of that, and also just make sure that I'm retaining as much control of the game as possible. I'll talk about motion controls, I'll talk about a couple other things as well, but let's keep this short and sweet. So I just wanted to show you right off the bat, you can see a couple things that are a little bit different about my game that are going to be maybe different in yours, and we'll jump into the settings in a second. But first off, I don't play with motion blur. 99% of the time the game doesn't have performance issues, but motion blur can affect that a little bit. And I also don't play with depth of field. You'll notice that more in the gameplay, but again, I actually think that feature on Switch with the resolution that it's at only makes it harder to see. Same with the motion blur, whereas like this allows me to run it with the highest resolution possible on any given drawn frame. That just makes me more comfortable. I really like the definition that I get. You can see the textures really come through at that point. The visuals really pop. And there used to be a couple different options as well that they've actually removed, that we'll talk about as well once we get out into Orb Vallis, which will take a little while to load. So while we're doing that, while we're loading down there, I just want to quickly jump into the settings here. Because it's a perfect time for us to jump in there while it's loading, and just talk about a couple things that I really like about this game and what they've been able to add as well. First off, motion controls are always a big thing for me, so we'll start there. With motion controls, I do toggle it on for always. That being said, you have the option to toggle it on always or toggle it on just when you're aiming down sights when you're holding that left trigger. I prefer it all and always, but again, if you get motion sickness easily, motion controls can really set that off. Additionally, if you don't have steady hands, it's something that you might not want to always have on, but it's nice for a little bit of added precision if you hold down those sights. That being said, I just don't care. I love the precision it gives me, and I love all that stuff. You can adjust motion controls, all that stuff. It's all there, and it's very similar as well. And we'll look a little bit at the melee as well, some of the changes that they just dropped into this update as well. So let's go over to the display tab, which is the one that I really like to focus on. I think this is the biggest thing about this game. This has a lot of options that you don't normally get in games like this. The first couple that I always talk about is just field of view. Up that to 78. That's as high as you can go. You're going to want to get a nice wide image here. Oh, it kicked me out, but we can go ahead and see what mine looks like, and look at that. Oh yeah, my Orb Vallis is just absolutely stunning. And this is I'm looking at it on a 55-inch TV, and it looks great. I'm just really thrilled. I'm getting a little bit of a drift on my controller with the motor controls, but that does happen. That's just a side effect. Let me go ahead and jump back into the configuration, the options as well. Okay, so we were talking about this. I go ahead and up field of view to 78. This is something I touched on in the first video. Do it again. This is absolutely necessary. I don't think there's any reason why you wouldn't want to. Enable screen shake. This is something that I actually really don't like when you're using motion controls. I think it takes away from the experience. On PC, I've never had a trouble, and I don't adjust this, but on this, I turned it off. Effects intensity. Keep it right around 100. I don't think there's any reason to up that unless you really are like into some of those special effects that they show off, and they really have some nice ones. So that's going to be probably based on your preference. I imagine this would affect performance as well, so just keep that in mind. Adaptive exposure, keep that on, just bounces the exposure on the game. Glare, I love glare. I love the way it bounces light. I think it's absolutely necessary to leave it on. It doesn't impact the performance. Film grain, I don't like it. It muddies up the image, and so I turn it off. GPU particles, I keep this on high. This absolutely can impact performance, so depending on the frame you're playing, I would recommend that you kind of look at this on an individual basis and judge from there. Depth of field. Now this is a little controversial one because it's a beautiful effect, right? It really looks great. There's a specific thing that you can do when you have it on. I'll show you just right now, that makes it really nice. You can see the menu effect is just really nice and everything like that. But like when you're bullet jumping. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, I will say this, motion depth of field is not an absolute killer and shouldn't change the performance of the game drastically. That being said, every single little post effect that I notice that we add on to the game adds a little bit of a delay in input, and that's just because that's how graphics work. It takes this long to draw a frame, and if you add more post effects to it, it takes slightly longer. Motion blur is another one that I really don't like. I can show you what that looks like. There's a reason I don't like it. If this game performed worse than 30 frames per second, I'd probably keep it on all the time, just because then it would feel a lot more smooth. That being said, this game stays at 30 frames per second, except for in the most hectic of situations. And you can already see there's a smear that gets on the screen that I can't deal with. It makes me feel like I'm playing in handheld mode, which is severely compromised. Again, these settings also work really well that I'm showing you for handheld mode because of the lower resolution that it tends to run at. It's not as bad as it used to be, though. I gotta give my hats off to Digital Extremes and Panic Button for working together to make sure that that's absolutely going above and beyond. There's a couple reasons I think that that's done that. There were a couple additional things that you could do, like ambient occlusion you could control. I always turned that off because, frankly, while I know graphics scores out there are going to tell you that that is an absolutely necessary thing, it changes the contact shadows. It makes it look so, I think, honestly, it's not worth it. And if you notice, let's go ahead and just take a quick look at some of these rocks around and these plants. The contact shadows are now pre-baked in. They're not there. So there is no ambient occlusion anymore in this version. They've actually taken that toggle away. So no more having to worry about ambient occlusion or whether or not that's worth it. And you can see right here, I no longer have the nice depth of field effect, but it doesn't bother me at all. So ambient occlusion was the biggest performance hog that I was noticing out of all of this. If you were on an older version, that was something that you had to, that I would recommend you turned off. I turned it off now. Or I would turn it off if it was there now. Bloom intensity, I keep it lower. I just think that it gets a little bit overblown. But you can play with that to your own liking. Don't go too high. Color correction, leave it on. Weapon elemental effects, leave it on. There's none of those are going to be drastically impacting. The two that you're going to want to worry about are motion blur and depth of field. Figure out what you prefer, but at the same time, I'm going to recommend turning these off. I think it actually improves performance quite a bit. Having it all on just makes it feel a little more sluggish. I'll try to kind of give you an example right here. It just, to me, while it like smooths it out, look at the amount of blur on the original, like around everything, and like in the background and in the foreground. And if I move quick, which this game is all about speed, it just gets a little bit hard to track. Let me see if I can show you exactly what it looks like when we're flying around. While it's really pretty, and I gotta say, like, it's always impressive to see this running on the Switch, you can start to see the pixelation that occurs because of all of these effects. So I just like to warn, and then even now we're starting to see some stutters because of the amount of streaming that we're doing and the speed at which we're streaming in. Let's go back out to like a safer zone, which is out in this this lake, which will be low performance hit. And then I'm gonna change some settings back, and I'll just oops. There we go. Change that back to how I like it. And like I said, I think this just allows it to run at a slightly higher resolution on a regular basis. Cleans up the image tremendously. There was one other thing that they also had in there, which was volumetric lighting. You used to be able to turn that off. I'm sort of glad that you can. While if you were having major performance issues, that was probably the biggest thing that could completely change that and fix your issues. It was not worth it. The visual downgrade was so significant, especially in certain areas, that I just didn't see it. Now in other areas it didn't matter, but here there's just some beautiful areas in Orb Vallis that I recommend you check out, and this just keeps the performance a little bit more steady, even with lots of enemies, as you can see, and we're flying at a very high speed. Let me jump off this. Let me in. Oh, that one's not. That's not how you get in. We gotta get in over there. So we're gonna get inside. This is just a nice area to check out, and you can just see it really does look great. I think they've just overall done a great job at adapting some of these graphical options to be a little bit more, I don't know, beneficial. And now the game looks absolutely great. So these are the performance profiles that I would recommend for both Orb Vallis and the Plains, especially if you're going to hang in there. Outside of that, most of the time it's not going to matter. And here's some of the melee situations. It used to be where you had to like choose what you were doing, and now you can do all your charges and stuff like that right from a gun to melee, which is cool. There's no more switching stances, and I think that's really nice. This is my first chance really getting hands-on with it, even in the PC version too, so you can just switch back and forth, which is cool. I might die here. So you can see it's holding up even under extreme load with lots of particles flying, and oh my god, the new melee visuals are just impressive as hell. Ooh. You can see why you can see why I use motion controls as well. I just feel like the aiming feels a lot better, and it allows me to whip it around, which in Warframe is kind of half the point. Hopefully this has been a helpful look at Warframe and some of the settings that you can apply to the game to make it run not only better, but be a better experience for your playtime as well. I really hope you like Warframe, and I hope you give it a really fair chance. This is just a good way for you to get started on the Switch version without having to wrestle with controls, without having to wrestle with frame rate, without having to get too nitty-gritty into all the settings. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. I really hope you enjoy our content. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you do like the video, and give us a comment. Let me know what you think the biggest difference maker is for you personally, and if you have any other changes you might want to see in future videos. Thank you again for stopping by, and as always, stay classy, coders.